Now, with 2 races to go, there'll be scores to settle, nerves to settle, and of course that vigorous contest for second in the championship, with Bright, Murphy and Ingalls still in the chase. And let's check the points situation to explain why this is a vigorous battle. Bright with 11 points to spare on Murphy. Another 37 to Russell Ingall. Kelly even is a mathematical chance of taking second place. But really, Jason Bright is in good shape. He's ahead of his rivals for that second place battle. Right now, let's get set for race 2. And a big one here. Ambrose nicely off the line. What a start from Lowndes. Jason Bright bogged it down. That's bad for the second place battle in the championship. Craig Lowndes wins the run into the first corner. What a brilliant start, Neil.
Jason Bright called up on the radio immediately, actually stalled the car at the critical moment. A great start for Lowndes, though. He leads the pack down into turn 2, and Bernard's made a beauty as well, position 3.
Excellent start from David Bernard and indeed Craig Lowndes in a car that struggled to hold off Jason Bright yesterday, let alone attack Ambrose for the lead. So this will be interesting. What gains have Ford Performance Racing made? And Rick Kelly has moved up into 4th, obviously with Bright's problem. And there's Murphy attacking, I think, with a little touch on the car in front of him as well. So he's in a vicious mood. Warren Luff prominently placed after yesterday's race. A great performance from him. He's pushing hard as well.
Marcus Ambrose was the fastest man in this morning's warm-up. They were very relaxed in the Stone Brothers Racing garage. They put their cars away early. Oh, Lowndes drops the right rear off at the exit of turn 8, and it's not often you get away with that. He's picked it back up. Rearward from the race leader, looking at Marcus Ambrose. The dispute for 3rd, and Kelly up the inside of David Bernard made a great exit off the hairpin turn 9. Kmart Racing Holden to 3rd.
Paul Radisich looking to attack Bernard now, and just behind him, Stephen Richards is prominent. Russell Ingall is next. And right behind Russell Ingall is Jason Bright, vengeful as they cross the start-finish line. A big cheer for Lowndes. It's Ford 1-2. Rick Kelly pushing hard behind him. Then Bernard, Radisich, Richards, Ingall. Bright dropping to 8th position after that first lap.
I don't think there's going to be much doubt about the fact that Ambrose has got good car speed and great consistency. He's going to blowtorch Craig Lowndes. The standing lap time for Lowndes, incidentally, a 41.2, a 41.5 for Marcus Ambrose. The order is Kelly, Bernard, Radisich, then Stephen Richards, Russell Ingall, Jason Bright. Look at Lowndes, slides all the way onto the exit of turn 4, which mispositions him a little for 5. He's sliding the car a lot. Then we have Stephen Johnson, Cam McConville. That's your top 10.
You might have noticed there 39 laps. It's 2 150-kilometre races today. 50 kilometres more than we saw in that twilight race yesterday. And the pit window is between laps 2 and 27. And of course, only the one compulsory stop for tyres as we had yesterday. So a little bit more wear expected today. Different strategies perhaps to be played out. And as Greg Rust pointed out, Russell Ingall will have the benefit of the strategy in the Stone Brothers garage. At the moment, he's struggling just a little bit. Stephen Richards has got away from him. Little gap there. Jason Bright is pushing hard from behind. We're riding with Russell now.
Pit window is open, and I think quite a lot of them are likely to dive in early here. Managing tyres this weekend's critical. 12 of them allocated for the 3 races. Tyre condition has been an issue. In fact, one of the things that I wanted to mention early in the program is the track personality here this weekend is changing. I would suggest like we've never seen it before. We've got still an easterly breeze today, much more humidity than yesterday, and pretty warm out there, and I'd suggest even warmer than the forecast. Fastest lap so far for Kelly. That's a terrific recovery when you think that he started out on that grid yesterday before the twilight race from position 21. He's now in 3rd position.
Clock goes on this stop. Ambrose wanting to make this weekend count, and it's smooth.
Marcus Ambrose, roll centre adjustment to that car. Couldn't quite see which way they went with it with the rear, but the tyres that went back on that car, the front ones look like they've done a little bit of mileage, but the rears look pretty healthy. So Marcus Ambrose in good stead.
Well, Brad Jones is right behind Russell Ingall there. And that's not too bad for him. I think they've made a bit of a gain from their pit stop, Aussie Mail Racing, but we haven't quite seen all the numbers shake out on the timing monitor yet. But I think Jones has gained a little bit. There's a lot of cars out there who still haven't made their first stops. Lowndes, Radisich, Stephen Richards, Bernard, Bright, Ellery, Bargwanna, Seaton, then Rick Kelly. Greg.
Well, Billy, I can tell you the reason Brad Jones may have made some gains there, it was a very slick stop by the Aussie Mail crew. 6.5 seconds by Brad Jones, and he fired out of pit lane for the Valvoline Cummins crew. Cameron McConville had a little bit of a slow one, and it enabled Greg Murphy to leapfrog him in that run through pit lane. John Bower comes in here now. Let's see if I can do another quick stop.
John, mate, keep it up. We've got a long way to go.
6.5 seconds for Kmart Racing. They're very good. Now, not so good for the other Aussie Mail car. There's a mess up here with Bow.
Last time out this weekend for Craig Lowndes and Ford Performance Racing in the CAT entry. Incidentally, Brad Jones has been assessed to have infringed in pit lane, and he'll need to do a drive-through penalty. And that's disappointing, given that Greg reported earlier that they had a ripper stop, 6.5 seconds. And that'll continue to add to the frustration in that camp this weekend. 1.0326 seconds is the margin. Lowndes to Radisich. Here is the battle between Bernard and Bright. And Bright is in 4th place at the moment and looking to go down the inside of Bernard on the run to 4. I think he's got it up the inside. He does the job.
Almost a slight rub there between the two cars as Bernard just gave way at the last moment and Bright completed the move. So sensible but vigorous competition there. Stephen Ellery right behind them, officially 5th at the moment.
Billy, just to add on that scenario, a 13.2 second stop then, unfortunately, for Stephen Richards, and it was almost an identical scenario to John Bower. That left rear was spinning. They were telling him to depress the clutch and to hit the brake as soon as they could. They couldn't do that, reel that up, and it really cost Richo some time. Standing by for Lowndes too, boys, by the looks of it.
I could hear them screaming on the radio, Greg, and sometimes even when the driver has the pedal fully depressed, it still just grabs a little and rotates the rear wheels, and that's why they screamed at them, brake, brake, brake.
But let's see how these two crews, alongside each other in pit lane almost, perform their stop. Can 888 get their guy out ahead of Ford Performance Racing?
Billy, that's exactly what's happened. Radisich out ahead of Lowndes, and the reason for that, they had a little bit of trouble taking that right rear off Lowndes' car, and it was the same problem for Glenn Seaton. So I'm wondering if it's a pressure problem, Neil, in relation to one of the rattle guns or something like that.
Yeah, if the bottles lose the critical pressure, and there they are, they've swapped around. We saw Radisich go by. I also thought that the right front was slow. It took a while to actually release the nut. They are critical to bottle pressure, and if they're depleted at all, these nuts are torqued on to a specific value, and obviously as the heat soaks through them, they can bind onto the wheel. And here comes Murphy serving his drive-through penalty.
Well, Neil, it's interesting. I just spoke to Rob Crawford at Kmart and asked him what the penalty was for. He said, I'm not really sure, but I think it may be because he took off through the SBR pit when he left pit lane. And he said, we'd let them through ours, we'd gone through theirs, so they're not sure exactly.
And you know what that could be? It might mean that he spent too long at speed, as Bradley has a huge slide down there at turn 2, in the manoeuvring and slow lane. Maybe he actually didn't get back out to the fast lane, but I'm sure we'll find out. Rob Crawford at that team moves on to the technical director's role for Teague next year, so he'll be a bloke that we'll be able to throw those questions at in 2005.
I was going to say, you'll find out then. Things looking pretty good for Jason Bright in terms of securing 2nd place in the championship now, with Murphy and Ingall suffering those setbacks. He leads the race without having pitted. Jason Richards is in 2nd place also to make his first stop. He's a good 13 seconds behind this man. Stephen Ellery has made a pit stop now. Max Wilson, by courtesy of these stops, has lifted up to 4th place in the race ahead of Morris, Baird and Winterbottom. All those guys are yet to hit pit lane. Of the guys to have made their stops, it's Marcus Ambrose. Paul Wheel, although he's only just come in, so I think that's false information there in a sense. He'll fall back down the order. It'll be Ambrose ahead of Rick Kelly. And well, there it is. Paul Wheel has now made his stop, as I suggested. So
missed out on race 1 yesterday after contact in qualifying with John Bow. Bow and Paul got together they've got to pump some oil into this car. So they got together on the approach to turn 6 and 7. That's not a good thing in the middle of a sprint race to have to feed that thing some oil. They have a dry sump in a V8 supercar, which means that they pump oil through rails in the car back to that tank in the rear, and there's a quick fitting on there that enables them to put some oil in. I went and watched him at turn 4 yesterday, and he would pick up the throttle in that particular corner later than most. He carries great speed across the face of the corner and into a very late apex, and then he's so gentle on the other side with the throttle application. The car doesn't slide, and the chassis behaving beautifully, and he's had the car of the weekend so far. It was a shame that we didn't see Mark Scaife in a stoush with him yesterday.
Owen Kelly there, who's yet to make his first stop, being passed by Stephen Johnson, who has, and Mark Scaife follows him through.
This is a long race in these humid conditions out here at the moment. 39 laps, a carry just on 100 odd litres of fuel, depends on how much you get through in each individual car and team. Good 60 or 70 kilos of fuel over the rear of the car. Stephen Richards is certainly hustling Mark Scaife here at the moment, and speaking of hustling, Radisic and Rick Kelly. Turn 4. Radisic right in behind the Kmart car and just gives him a little wake-up call in case he's not sure who it is behind him.
This is 8th versus 7th, but really it's 3rd versus 2nd when you count the pit stops. Bright, Richards, Morris, that's your top 3 yet to make their stop. Then there's Ambrose, Craig Baird and Winterbottom yet to make their stop, and then this battle here. And there are the comparative times. Radisic has reeled him in very effectively.
Bright's coming in this lap. 14 seconds is his margin over Jason Richards at the moment. Paul Morris 3rd, and then Marcus Ambrose. This is a great battle between these guys. The last run in the better electrical car for Paul Radisic before he moves to Team Kiwi next year. It's a series of lasts. We've detailed some of them. Seaton to Dick Johnson Racing, Lowndes to 888 Race Engineering, the better electrical car, Murphy to Paul Wheel Racing, Baird to WPS, Tander to Kmart Racing, who had a problem with the driveline and the Valvoline car yesterday on the line. Jason Bright to Ford Performance Racing, though not yet announced. Mentioned Paul Radisic. Greg Ritter to Ford Performance Racing. Ooh, close, close, close here at turn 2. Bang. Hello. Bang again. G'day. You're allowed to do it, just provide it doesn't get too aggressive or push the bloke off the road. They won't cope with that in race control.
And Neil, it was interesting. I spoke to Rick before this race, and we were talking about turn 1 yesterday, where he and Paul Radisic were having a battle again as well, and the Rad was quicker. There he is up the inside of him as well. But Rick was saying, I'm struggling with mid-corner push, and they catch me through the middle of the corners.
Lowndes coming at Kelly now as well. He moved up to join that pair. And Rick is under all sorts of pressure again as Radisic starts to pull out some gap already.
That was a good move from Paul Radisic. On the exit of 4, he stayed wide. It enabled him to sneak up the inside. I think Rick also gave him a little bit of extra space, probably knew that he was a shot duck out there. And oh, he's got a little touch up here from Craig. He's continued to give him a push. A little bit naughty.
Well, at that part of the car, Radisic was hitting him pretty square on the back. Lowndes there was on the left right, or the left rear, I should say. That doesn't make much sense, does it?
And the push went on a little bit, and he's getting another one here now. So this will get the temperature up in the cockpits of both these cars. Luckily, Craig, right at the very end of the turn 9 exit, just fanned the throttle enough for Rick to... And Rick just said if he keeps doing that, if he keeps doing that, I'll hold him up even more. And that's where you can sometimes hurt yourself when you give somebody a touch-up.
A 9-second stop for Jason Bright, guys. The message from Phil Keat, his crew chief, as he trundled down pit lane was, watch your speed limit. A number of guys have been done for pit lane speeding.
Sorry, Greg, but as you spoke there, Lowndes and Kelly did come together, and Kelly has speared off onto the grass. It was a little tap. Lowndes was pretty much committed up the inside. Natalie Lowndes, his wife, grins a little sheepishly there, but it was an aggressive contest. And Rick has snookered himself here.
And just turned me around twice and then just ran me off the road. Okay, we saw it on telly.
Here we go, replay down at turn 2. And, I tell you what, I'd like to have a little bit more of a look at that in detail, but Craig certainly got very high and wide there, and it it certainly looked like he was going to make sure that Rick was out in the dirty stuff for a while.
Well, there's no doubt he was through there, but it's the width exactly that you're talking about that is the big question, not their proximity.
He was certainly a long way down, so there's no question about his positioning, but obviously a steering drama now with the Kmart car.
Yeah, no, you're right. Just spoke to Rob Crawford after the Lowndes stuck it down the inside there, and Rick tried to turn and hit him at the right rear. It has broken the steering.
You want to just get, if you can on the radio, get some fire marshals over here because there's dry grass underneath and there's a risk of it catching a light. Okay, mate, thank you for that. We've got all that. Just get to a safe position. We can see you on tally.
And that's Matthew Nilsson on the radio and just instructing Rick to get up and out of the way. Even that far down in turn 2, it'd only take a millisecond for a car to get down there. And there is a bit of a fire risk maybe, but the temperature would have been more in the cockpit than outside the car, I think. Here's the situation. Jason Richards still leads, yet to take his compulsory stop from Marcus Ambrose, Paul Radisich, Craig Lowndes. There was a bit of spirit between Lowndes and Rick Kelly in that series of contacts on that previous lap.
Bright versus McConville here. McConville in 9th position. Bright just taking that over now. In terms of the drivers fighting for second place in the championship, we've noted Jason Bright into the top 10 here in this race, but Russell Ingall is back in 20th position now, courtesy of the drive-through. Greg Murphy is even worse off, so Jason Bright, if he stays cool, will be in second place at the end of this round in the championship as Johnson and Richards, that's Stephen and Stephen, continue their battle for 5th place. Just behind them is David Bernard and then Mark Scaife. And Bright is attempting to catch this little group here. Hasn't quite come into shot yet, but he's about a second and a half behind them. So Jason Richards playing a lonely game. Tasman Motorsport throwing the dice on a later pit stop than everybody else. You might recall they gambled on the pit stop at Symmons Plains as well. A few teams did, in fact. It didn't work out. They expected rain, which didn't come. Johnson under attack here from Stephen Richards.
They haven't really had enough speed in the Jason Richards car this weekend, other than in that first qualifying group. And when they take their stop, they've only got a 4.7 second margin and 40-odd seconds to transit the lane and take your service. So that'll bury him back down in the pack a fair bit, but you've got to play percentages sometimes if you go to try and grab an outcome.
20 laps to go. Two sons of famous fathers doing battle here at Eastern Creek. Bright pressing Scaife here.
Interested if you can get for us, Greg or Darryl, an update on the track temp and air temp, because it looks to me like the conditions are pretty brutal out there at the moment.
And this could be brutal. Doesn't look anywhere near as brutal as the Lowndes-Rick Kelly battle a little earlier. That was lively. And they're hunting up David Bernard as well. Up ahead of them, Johnson and Richards are waging a little battle as Jason Richards finally makes his first stop. His gap on Marcus Ambrose when he pitted was not much more than 3 seconds.
Top job by the Tasman Motorsport team, a 5.7 second stop, their level best to keep Jason Richards in the game. In temperature terms, Neil, ambient 28, track is up to 38 degrees right now.
Well, if Jason comes out with a bit of clear track, as this field is quite spread out now. Oh, Bright bumping Scaife like a couple of rhinos battling out there. Look at that monster.
And Bright's got fresher rubber than Mark Scaife, and the message from Rob Starr to Mark was just let Brighty go. You know, don't try and fight him too much, and that's what he's done on the approach to turn 4, try and tag along with him. The other guy that was sliding a lot was the car just in front, the David Bernard entry. He just rounds up Garth Walden. And
Walden's got his eyes on here because he has to let Brighton skate through as well.
A few of them will be starting to feel it now. Lap 20 and just a lap 21, in fact, of a 39-lap race. They've now been on this set of tyres for a little while in many cases, particularly those that came in early. They'll be starting to feel the pinch in those conditions. And apart from just the raw numbers that Greg gave us a moment ago, it's also quite humid out there. And that makes it unpleasant in the cockpit. It also makes the engines a little slower. And just generally the tyres don't particularly love it.
So I wonder if that can be a gain for Jason Richards, who will have better use of, we assume, fresh tyres that he put on in that last stop.
Yeah, Richo, Bridie's the car behind you. He's about 2 seconds behind with a bit of speed because he only pitted 2 laps ago. We'll just see how it goes. He's got a fast bit, no doubt.
Jason won't be in a win-threatening situation, but he may well improve from where he finished the first race overnight, and that was 17th.
So the order's now been cleansed with Ambrose from Radisich, 12 seconds. Here comes Jason down the inside of David.
Oh, no. And Scaife pinches back a position. Bright getting sideways.
And Bridie also took a while to pick up the gear. He went in there, got himself all tangled up. He had the rear brakes locked. He overshot. And then in the process, because he was busy trying to slow the car down, he fumbled the gear change. He's got the guard folded on top of the tyre as well. And they'll look at that very carefully at PWR. For the very reason.
Mate, we're keeping an eye on it, Bridie. We're keeping an eye on it. Just see how it's all feeling, mate.
This is actually a big deal here because we've seen setbacks to Murphy and Ingle.
Yes.
If there is a setback to Bright that brings him back to those two guys, the second place battle is alive again in the championship. So a lot of interest in this race, and there is more smoke.
Yeah, it's actually off the leading edge. It's not from the guard. Here's how it happened. Jason had a look down the inside of David. He got crossed up and then makes light contact with Mark. And it's just been enough to dislodge the splitter and push it back a little. And it's rubbing on the loaded corners, obviously. I don't know that it's a major drama. It's not metal on the time. It's as good as in some respects with being carbon, but he might get away with it.
Now they're settled down. Ambrose's lead is 12.3 seconds. Radisich.
All right, Bridie, I'd say we're going to have to pit this lap, mate. We're going to have to pit at the end of this lap, Bridie.
Well,
and
that'll make it interesting.
When you consider the amount of damage and the number of checks that would have to have been written in the recent past for this team, it's probably a wise decision, because if it punctures in a bad spot and fires Jason off, a lot of concrete around here, you can make big damage and cost yourself a big headache. So they're going to bring it in. They'll fold the guard back and they'll just drag the splitter forward again, make sure that it's not going to puncture that tyre. Yeah, look, it's pretty bad there down at 4. Where on the right hand is where it loads up on the front left. It looks pretty ugly, doesn't it?
Craig Lowndes is just under 3 seconds behind Radisich. That's a focal point of the race as well. That's the battle for second. Stephen Johnson just outside the top 3. Well, I say just outside the top 3. The gap's 9.5 seconds now, so he has some catching up to do, and he's defending from Stephen Richards and David Bernard.
It's going to take about 33 seconds for Jason Bright to be able to run through the pit lane. He doesn't have to stop for any great long period of time, but it's probably going to be longer than a fuel stop. So 33 seconds, let's say, plus 10. So 43, 45 seconds or thereabouts. We need to have a bit of a think about where that drops him into proceedings.
Well, Ingle is 15th at the moment, and about 20 seconds off the pace. But of course, taking into account traffic hold-ups, it's difficult to assess it cleanly. Now, Murphy is in 25th position. Now, he's the guy who's 11 points behind Bright in the championship, and he is quite a distance from the leaders.
It's a good battle between Scaife and Bernard, 6th and 7th, and Scaife having a little look down the inside, maybe not quite close enough yet. Bit of light contact in the middle of the corner.
They're not holding back this weekend, are they?
They actually they don't hold back most weekends, mate. And when the further back in the pack you get, the crazier it gets, but often we don't necessarily always see it. We've caught a bit of it today, though. We've caught the boys red-handed when they've been in full war mode.
Not that you were ever involved in anything like that, Neil, in your time.
Never. So Bernard's got some strengths in a couple of areas and perhaps a couple of weaknesses in others, and that service has been done on Jason's car pretty quickly, I'd say.
Righto, mate. So there's still plenty of racing to go. The important thing is to get it to the finish. You've got the whole next race, okay?
And that's a very good point made by Phil Keed.
He comes out behind Anthony Tratt.
There's the remaining laps in this one and one whole race to come. Here we go, turn 9. Scaife, a little bit of contact with Bernard on the exit. He's giving him a touch-up. Not a lot of love lost between these two guys.
It's Not a lot of love lost between anyone out there these days. It's become very toey in the last couple of seasons.
There's a lot of laughing and giggling midweek when they're all on the PR treadmill, but when they get out here, it's basically warfare.
Brave, Mark, keep it clean, mate. This is for position. We're getting a good position, mate. Nice and easy.
That's a good point. He's 7th, Mark Scaife, which is a great recovery considering what happened in the early part of yesterday's race.
And both Jeff Grech and Rob Starr will be conscious of trying to manage the situation. He's got to run at him here. He should be able to get down the inside, yes. Can he pull it up okay? He's on the slightly dirtier bit of track, but no, Scaife will do that quite nicely, relatively easily. David, I think, returned the favour there just in the middle of the corner with just a light tap. But Scaife has got more speed than Bernard, and away he skips.
So that's 6th place now for Scaife.
Yeah, both Jeff and Rob will be just trying to really manage this, what has been a very awkward situation for them yesterday when 2 team cars get together at turn 1. They need to make sure they manage Mark in the right way. They need a result. They just need points. They need something to hang a hat on in the Christmas break going into the new year.
Marcus Ambrose leads the race by 12.3 seconds. He's maintained that fairly well. Paul Radicic, though, is having a fight as Craig Lowndes attacks him.
As Jason Bright was entering pit lane for the second time, he was on the radio to his crew chief, Phil Keaton. He said, is this the right call to pit and change this damaged left front tyre? Have a look at the scoring on the leading edge of the tyre and the way it's almost worn down to the belts here. Was it the right call? Most definitely, say the team from Dunlop. Too risky for Jason Bright considering his position in that battle for second in the championship.
Yeah, that's really tortured the shoulder of that tyre, so that was a good call. If they'd stayed out there, that would no doubt have punctured, and depending on where it did it, might have sent him off to a concrete wall. We're looking rearward from Stephen Johnson's car at Stephen Richards.
And just an update on the positions now of those 3 contenders for second place. Russell Ingall is 14th.
Stephen Johnson's hurting for lap speed, Billy. 37.1 on the last lap. That's why the pressure's on here.
Ingall 14th. Murphy 25th. Bright 27th. Gee, I
can't believe how much the time's bled away in this race. They just have absolutely no pace at all, half of these guys. Here's Bernard up between turns 11 and 12, spinning. That's looking from Mark Scaife's car, and Bernard loops it round and points up to the crowd there on the hill.
It's cost him about 5 spots. Russell Ingall has gone past him now into 12th position.
Ellery's in. He's actually had a pretty reasonable weekend so far. His result in the first race I thought was very good. Bit of chat around about him at the moment as to what may be happening in 2005. Some of the political whispers are suggesting he could end up at Triple Eight Race Engineering alongside Lowndes. Problem with the exhaust, he must have dragged it across one of the ripple strips here. Very aggressive ripple strips here, particularly up at turn 11, when you virtually clean jump a curb up there, and you often hear the exhaust bang on the floor as you go over there.
Hello, can you hear me?
And the boys are trying to just drag it off, obviously.
Yeah, it's just the muffler's broken. We're just pulling it off and we'll be on our way shortly.
And it'll be nice hot work under there trying to drag that off at the present times. Meanwhile, he's just dropping...
The cap was filling up with smoke. Almost dead in here.
Yeah, the muffler's completely unravelled, and that metal wool, they use that in the muffler to be able to reduce the noise to get them under the maximum limit at all the various racetracks, and you can vary the amount of wool that you have in there, change the noise levels in the car. And it's probably burnt the floor, which is why Stephen was saying we had so much smoke in the cabin. They need to get that off there as well, and I'm sure that, yeah, there's at the back of the car you'll see that Tiga and Avesco guys are just making sure the car's safe to depart.
Fire it up. Okay, away you go.
Stephen Richards just getting right onto the back there. See the very unusual shape of turn 2. It does require quite a weird entry and approach, quite different to most other corners. In fact, it's quite unique in Australian motorsport, turn 2 at Eastern Creek. Got a bit of an idea of the bumps across the peak of the hill at 4 and then also into the actual turn itself. You can see the rise and fall in the road. They're also looking rearward between 4 and 5.
It'll be a very interesting situation next year when Stephen Johnson is joined by Glenn Seaton. could be an opportunity for a team that's on the rise to make even bigger gains.
Look at this little battle. They're buried further back than fullback. They're right at the bottom of the lap charts, but this is a battle between Bright and Murphy. Bright has had car speed over the Kmart car all weekend, and he's going to have it again as Murphy runs very wide. Oh, he just hangs on. He's actually probably reasonably positioned now for 3. They're side by side. Good bit of racing. No paint exchange yet. The two of them absolutely at it on the run to 4. This is terrific.
It's also very important. 11 points apart. Now they're only 2 points apart.
Eventually, Murph's going to run out of road here on turn 5 and has to slot back in. Wasn't that fantastic watching the two of them door handle to door handle?
Well, Jason gains another 2 points here. Of course, that makes the gap 13 in terms of the championship. Russell Ingall is up ahead of them, but he hasn't quite gathered up enough positions to buy into the battle for second in the championship.
Murphy had to think about it, because if he swerved around and got too much aggression in his game there, he would have probably knocked around the car he might drive next year.
That's one of the interesting points with the same situation here. What does Lowndes do to Radicic? Because that could be the car he's driving next year as well.
Yeah, although
he wasn't afraid to give Rick a tap. No.
Right at the moment, I don't think it's just me being silly. They're not thinking about that stuff, but just gives you an idea of where everybody's wandering as they all hunt for the Holy Grail in the 2005 championship. Slowly but surely, Lowndes is getting at Radicic here.
Well, I'm not sure whether this is the gain made by FPR or whether the 888 car isn't quite as quick, but certainly Lowndes was struggling to hold position yesterday rather than attack.
Looked like Craig went through a bit of a phase in the race. There's that curving I was telling you about over at 11, where you give the car a real beating across the top of the sawtooth. Yeah, it looked like Lowndes kind of went through a phase in the middle of the race where he was struggling a little bit, but his pace has maintained a good even keel in the last few laps, and I think it's Radicic just struggling a little bit in several of the corners.
And these two have opened up a gap of 15.5 seconds on Stephen Johnson, so they've increased that gap consistently. Whether they're going quicker or Stephen's going slower in his bid to hold off Stephen Richards, it's hard to say. Ambrose's lead, incidentally, is nearly 15 seconds, and Bernard has spun. He's lost a heap of ground today after a terrific race on Saturday. As
of 1 lap ago, the situation in the points for the minor placings, Bright would have 18.94, Murphy 18.81, and Ingall 18.72, so 13 and 9 points respectively separating these guys. Sets up a great one in our race later this afternoon.
It certainly has tightened up, and don't think for a moment that position is not important to those drivers. They are very, very keen to claim the highest ground possible. Now, Tander, well, Morris has collided with Tander now, or vice versa, depending on which team you support. Morris has already had the one drive-through ordered. Now, Lowndes
just lost a little bit of momentum in the last lap, so...
About a lap ago, he was pushing up the inside, probing the outside. He was actually...
They'll both be right at the very limit of the tyre performance on the car. Here's the current standings I alluded to before. Marcus is out of the game, and as I said earlier, the box is ticked for the championship for him. But look at this little battle for the minor placings between Bright, Murphy, Ingall, and then Stephen Richards is 5th. Further down the order, this is if they finished as they currently are. Rick Kelly, his brother, then Jason Bargwana, John Bowe, Stephen Johnson, the top 10 in the championship. Last lap through for Marcus Ambrose, a 36.6. For Paul Radicic, a 7.0. So a neat 37, and then a 7.1 for Craig Lowndes. Lowndes will have a think about it between 11 and 12. Couldn't do it. There's a little short shoot there. If you can get your car into position and squirt it, sometimes you can just take away track position. He couldn't do it. That probably hurt him for his run out of 12. Still got time on his side. Great, intriguing battle between two top runners. Lowndes gets right over the ripple strip, further to the left than Radicic, and the car rattles.
Here we go.
Now, Lowndes is trying to get so far around the outside that he has the inside for turn 3, but he's not far enough up to be able to do it just yet. And I tell you, the fella that's got great speed at the moment is Jason Richards. He's starting to attack the back of Stephen Richards, and he could even get him before the race is done. So the tyres have been well looked after on the Tasman Motorsport entry.
Well, he made that very late pit stop, you might recall, so I did raise the point earlier in the race whether Richards' late pit stop would have benefited him towards the end, and it certainly has. He's managed to improve. He's attacking Stephen Johnson now. I beg your pardon, Stephen Richards, having disposed of Steve Johnson.
He does have terrific speed, and here goes Stephen Richards down the inside of...
and there is Jason capitalising. Just loses momentum there as he slipped through, and Stephen was able to put pressure on him, but couldn't get past. And they're tangled up here with Dale Breed, who's a lap behind them. Stephen Johnson hasn't been able to quite get past Dale, so that'll be a further problem for him. But 3 laps to go. Radicic still ahead of Lowndes in this battle for second. They have a 17-second gap on the battle we just saw a moment ago. That's Jason Richards, Stephen Richards and Stephen Johnson.
And they're tripping over each other to the extent now that Radicic and Lowndes are in the high 37s, and for Craig it was a 38 even. So that's just amazingly slow. So tyre condition is poor, the track temperature's up. Meantime, it's nearly 20 seconds the margin, Ambrose to Radicic. The water temperature will be creeping up in the Lowndes car too, because he's just jammed right under the back of Radicic now, and he has been for so long. It'll definitely have an effect. In the position he's in at the moment, could be as much as 10, 15, maybe even 20 degrees water temperature.
Radicic sweeps around turn 1.
This is where Craig needs to be closer if he's able to get it done, but he just doesn't have the pace through turn 1. Listen to how little throttle they've got going through that corner. Just tickling the cars around in a grip condition where the lap time is so poor. They're just coaxing these cars home, but very much on the limit. Radicic online for the best performance of the season so far for him, and his parting shot with this team.
That lapped car they went past, incidentally, was Lee Holdsworth.
Now, we talked earlier about the fact that Jason Richards had really good speed on Stephen Richards, and while he was under pressure, Stephen just puts the right-hand side of the car off the concrete between 11 and 12, and that's enough for the Tasman car to get through. And then Richards came back and argued the point and got back on top once more. So this is a great battle between these unrelated drivers with the same surname. Now, if Lowndes can get a bit closer this time, he might get a run at him. He's certainly getting a benefit from the hole punched in the air by Paul's car. Craig's car was sliding right at the critical moment in the middle of 1. He gets closer, 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 but not close enough. And Radicic is a wake-up. He slows his car down a little earlier, makes sure that it's on race line, millimetre on race line. It wasn't a moment to try and think to yourself, oh, I could squeeze another half metre out of it under brakes here. Radicic is too experienced and too cluey to make that blue.
Talk about defensive driving courses. Paul Radicic is handing Craig a lesson here at the moment. Not much more than a lap to go. There'll be 1 lap to go when they pass the start-finish line once more.
Over 20 seconds the margin from Ambrose to Radicic. This is the focus of the race between the Kiwi and Craig Lowndes. The cabin temperatures are absolutely on the boil. I had the word through a moment ago. The telemetry is telling us 53 degrees in the cockpit of these cars at the moment as they ply their trade. Their heart rates will be up. Oh, Lowndes makes a mistake right in the middle of 9 and loses a critical 20 or 30 metres.
So Radicic can breathe again.
It's an independent battle. It has no impact on either the championship or the runner-up position, but it's a terrific contest of who wants to blink first or who's forced to blink first as this man sets off on the last 4-kilometre run of race 2 of 3 in what is becoming an absolute crushing weekend for Marcus Ambrose, Pertec and Stone Brothers Racing. Mixed in with the traffic, their car just looks head and shoulders above other cars here this weekend.
20 seconds up his sleeve, so this traffic won't really bother him too much. He can afford to camp behind them and still cruise to victory. fair bit of positional change going on up ahead of him for some very lowly positions in the field.
Marcus will be conscious of the fact that he doesn't need to buy into anything up ahead. If a gap opens and it's easy, he'll do the job. There's one of them. I think that was Paul Dumbrell giving him some space.
He was in a battle with Alex Davison, of course, has been given a drive for Castrol Perkins Racing. But
Ingles 9th, by the way. Bright is 21st. Murphy is 23rd.
Well, Ingles done himself a tremendous service here. He's positioned himself as well as possible. Marcus has to be careful here.
Murphy gets up the inside of Morris in a classic crisscross at 11 and 12. Marcus just sits back with amusement and tries to stay clean and out of the way of it all.
But Dumbrell's having a crack at him here. Marcus Ambrose in the middle of traffic.
Marcus, great job, mate.
Now pulls out, heads across the start-finish line towards his team. 2 victories out of 2.
Thanks, boys. Be back in the pit lane there.
And here's the battle for second, and it's going to resolve in favour of Paul Radisich. What a terrific pressure drive from him, and he'll be absolutely wrapped with that. It's been a heartbreaking season for him. And Craig Lowndes, a great drive for third.
Thanks a lot.
So a second and third.
Anyone go up and complain?
Great drive this weekend so far for Lowndes. I don't know who was talking about complaining then, but a second and third for him, certainly very important.
This is a very important finish too. Russell Ingall crossing behind Max Wilson. That's a good result for Max, incidentally. But that is 9th position for Russell Ingall, and even 100 points for the weekend so far. Not really threatening for the round victory as he did in Symmons Plains, but will he jump up to second in the championship? It's possible. He's made some good gains in this race. Top 10 rounded out by Cameron McConville. We'll recap all the finishing positions soon. Some big losses in this race. Among them, of course, Jason Bright, Rick Kelly, who'd fought so hard in race 1 to 5th position. David Bernard also fell down the order quite dramatically. Here we go. Radisich wins the battle with Lowndes. It'll be on again, though, in race 3. Stay with us for that one. It'll be Butte. Stephen Richards ahead of Jason Richards, who's showing plenty of speed here for Tasman, so in good shape as well for race 3. Johnson, Scaife, then Wilson and Ingall. Cameron McConville rounding out the top 10, more than 50 seconds off the pace. Bargwanna, a very even weekend. He was 10th in race 1. Then Todd Kelly, who's been fighting back from the disaster on the first corner yesterday. And on down the order we go. We'll be back with more soon.